This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience. David Housel described it best. We are living the whole of the Auburn experience. Whether we're talking about Auburn football, Auburn volleyball, every other sport in between, whether we're talking about someone who lives in the loveliest village on the plains or up in Alaska, whether we're talking about academics, alumni that are famous, that are connected to Auburn, everything is part of the experience. But at its core, it is all about our sports, all about our culture, and all about our family. And because it is about the Auburn family, we have to have those family members here to discuss it. I am your host, Kyle Loomis, back again with the best co-host in the land for the Auburn Experience Podcast, episode 48, Mr. Austin Scott. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Kyle. War Eagle. I love how you describe the whole of the Auburn experience every time with our friend David Housel's wise words. Kyle, something about the Auburn experience that makes me very happy and something I've come to appreciate more in the last year is when we have those father-son ties of the Auburn experience. When we, specifically in recruiting, maybe we hear about the son of a former Auburn player has now decided to come to Auburn. One of those would be Stephen Davis. His son committed to Auburn several years ago, but Stephen Davis wore number 48 for the Auburn Tigers back in the day. And so he is our episode 48 number. That was a hard one to find, so I'm very proud of that. Stephen Davis and I guess Stephen Davis Jr., our episode number 48.
Hey, listen, I like how you got there eventually. That
Thank
was a
you.
good one to pick
Eventually.
up. Tying in the father and son thing, not unselfishly at all on your part.
Never
Anything like that gets worked into how we discuss things here. But I guess that's what makes it a great show, is making it a little bit more personal. So Stephen Davis and Stephen Davis Jr. That takes me back because I remember watching the Super Bowl that he was in with the Panthers and just being like,
yep.
How cool is it that an Auburn running back is, and it happened before, obviously there's been other Auburn greats running in Super Bowls, but I remember specifically watching, I think it was the Patriots, wasn't it? Am I thinking about
that 03, 04 area one?
Yeah, where Adam Vinatieri ripped our hearts out at the end. Yeah,
that's right.
And he had a great year. Season.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously because he did well. Obviously, his team did pretty well to get into the Super Bowl. So we can reminisce about that stuff all day. Let's jump into Auburn potpourri a little bit and talk about a lot of different things here in just short sound bites. I want to just start off by yet again shouting out not just one Auburn golf program, but two. If you haven't found out by now, you're not an Auburn fan. I'm taking away your Auburn card. Megan Schofield, women's amateur champion. We interviewed her this week. There is an episode that you can listen to audio-wise on the YouTube sphere. Check it out. Had a great time talking to her about how unique of an experience that was when you connect to Auburn, but obviously on her own. And then also J.M. Butler went all the way to the semifinals of the men's side of the amateur championship and looked like he was on track to maybe kind of make something really cool happen there for Auburn with a dual thing. Either way, great representation by these programs. We don't often get to talk about golf a whole lot, but this is definitely one of those occasions, Austin, where it's a joy to talk about.
Yeah, and really exciting time. Kind of all happened for Megan right about this time a week ago. Last week we were talking about it might be coming down the pipe. She's going to win here soon. And right after we got off, we found out it was official. So, really cool conversation with her. Really love that you got to talk with her and about her experiences. And just, another place that Auburn's on the map nationally, and Auburn is being Auburn, as we like to say these days.
Absolutely. I love that she is on the billboards as you come closer to the exits of Auburn and onto campus. I mean, that is Auburn being Auburn at its finest. I want to talk a little bit about some football news, some discussion about the honoring of some very important years because their anniversaries are coming up. You know, those when they fall in the 10s and the 5s of certain years is when they like to do these type of things. This season at Auburn, you need to mark these dates, especially if you already got season tickets or just tickets in general, or try to get them if you can. But for the Georgia, the Ole Miss, and the Alabama game, we will be honoring the 19 '83 team, the 1993 team, the 2013 team in that order, starting with Georgia, Ole Miss, and of course the 2013 year being honored on the Iron Bowl, as it will be so appropriate for the Bammers to have to sit through all of that. Your thoughts, impressions about those announcements, and which one are you most excited to attend?
Oh yeah, I mean, the 3 biggest home games of the year get 3 big parts of it to recognize 3 incredible teams that have come through Auburn and come have very fond memories of. Um, and I think it's gonna be super exciting. It's hard not to say that 2013, which is hard to believe it's been 10 years, will be the Iron Bowl game. I think that that's gonna be really exciting to see. It's always fun to see which players can come back, which ones are able to make the trek back, which coaches are able to come back. So I'm excited for that. Um, and for each of those respective teams. You know, Kyle, it's pretty interesting how many what's the word? Recognizable teams are worthy that happen with a 3 at the end. So are we looking into something that we might have a special year this year? We're talking about the 2023. Now, granted, we did not mention the 2003 team in that, right? Like that's the one we're missing. But, you know, we had 83, 93, maybe 13, 23. Maybe we're talking about the 2023 team someday.
We posted about this on social media this week, and someone asked, "What about the 2003 team?" And I'm like, "What do you want me to say?" I mean, it was only the number 1 ranked team that completely fell apart with the most incredible backfield ever. Now, look, it's not any one particular person's fault or player or coach or anything. It didn't work, right? But boy, did it work 1 year later. And that's what we're most thankful about. So yes, we don't really mention the 2003 year a whole lot, but those other 3s, we're pretty fond of them. It's going to be pretty fun to celebrate them this year at those particular games. I want to mention briefly, selfishly, since you were selfish at the beginning talking about father and son stuff, I selfishly got to go to a volleyball exhibition match here in Atlanta. I live outside of Atlanta a little bit. Georgia Tech was hosting an exhibition for Auburn. Always good to be in town with any Auburn team that comes. I also go to the men's basketball games here when they go to the holiday hoops given. We'll try to do that this year, but it was fun to go on the campus of Georgia Tech. And boy, let me tell you what, I was surprised how much Georgia Tech students get up for their volleyball team.
Really?
There were Auburn people there, but boy, you couldn't find them because there was so much yellow jacket everywhere. Even I called him B, but the B as he was passing by me tried to get a high five from me, and I didn't give him one, so he got like slapped me on the shoulder. I'm like, what do you expect me to do, man? I'm not here to high five you. But very happy to go out and celebrate a time to watch the volleyball team in their last exhibition match at Georgia Tech. Let me tell you something, Austin. We got some tall ladies on that team. And Jessica, that was her first time going to an Auburn volleyball match, even though it was on the road. And she was like, Kyle, most of these girls are like taller than you. I'm like, yeah, what'd you think? I think
that's exciting. I think it'll be fun to see how that team progresses. And obviously there's a lot of excitement about that team. Not meant to be a pun, but a lot of buzz surrounding this team. So we're we're looking forward to the season, and I'm glad you got to go out there. I'm glad some Auburn people made the trip or decided to go. You know, whether they're around the Atlanta area or not. That's an exciting thing. Auburn Georgia Tech is one of those special rivalries across a bunch of sports. I wish they'd get back to.
Yeah, that was fun to see. You could definitely tell the Georgia Tech fans were not happy that we were there. So, I may have thrown out a few comments here and there. I was like the reject engineering school, but anyway,
did you land some punches that might sting a little bit?
They might have left a little bit of a sting. I'm not sure about that.
We'll have
sting. All right, that's enough with that. You've run that run its course. Let's talk about this. School's back in session for Auburn. We kind of hinted at it, looking towards move-in day and stuff last time, but it's officially back. Makes me think of my time back the first week. I really enjoyed the first week on campus because of everything that was kind of, new and fresh. You weren't really getting into much. This week, though, is when the students really kick into high gear. So they're probably like, shut up, Kyle. You don't know what you're talking about. Now we're really getting into the nitty gritty of things. But, one thing that I do wish that I had gotten to do was ride around with the president of golf cart. Chris Roberts was again this year riding around in the golf cart. I really wish I had gotten that. And maybe our president at the time, I guess, it wouldn't have been Leith. It would have been Gouge the Gouge for me. I don't know about you.
Goosh.
I wish I had had an opportunity to be driven around by the Goosh. Would you have wanted to take part in that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for a multitude of reasons. My freshman year, it would have been President Googe. Um, but I mean, how nice is it on a nice hot August day to see the president rolling up with a golf cart and asking if you want a trip to Haley Center?
Yep.
I'm not sure many people would pass that up.
No, I definitely wouldn't pass that one up unless, you just didn't know who it was and it was just some random person you thought. But I hope most people recognize who your president is. He's a pretty big deal. I mean, let's be honest. He's kind of the reason you're all there, basically. That Auburn doesn't exist without leadership. So we're thankful of Chris Roberts, thankful of the new semester that is beginning. Here, I'll just throw some stuff out just to round out Auburn potpourri, things that are worthy of note. Women's basketball 3-0 in Europe, beating the Paris All-Stars, the Swiss All-Stars, the Monaco All-Stars. Great trip for them. And then the men's tennis team has added John Roddick as an associate head coach. You know that last name? Obviously, there's a reason behind it. So exciting things still happening on the Plains in all the sports categories. We'll have plenty of opportunities to talk about many of them coming up very soon. But now we're going to get into our major topics tonight. We're going to talk about, obviously, that quarterback battle that just concluded. And Austin and I will finally make that public apology to the Toomer's Oak Trees coming up now. One thing that we have all been focusing on, and it feels like every year, Austin, fall camp,
Yep.
Who's your quarterback, right? Like that's really what it is. Not since maybe year 2 of Bo Nix has this not been in question, even when Bo was here and he was clearly the best one there, despite the people that couldn't get there. I'm going to not use the expression that we're just being ignorant. Bo was clearly the best quarterback. But we've had a quarterback competition for a lot of the last few years. And this one obviously got a little bit interesting. You and I have chronicled it a lot in talking about fall camp. Was this Payton Thorne's job to win or lose? Was Robbie as much of a factor as he should have been in, and rightfully so? Was Holden, as the reports seem to indicate, that he might be a bigger factor. But as we have found out now officially, that Payton Thorne will be the starting quarterback for Auburn football this first game. And that's all he's guaranteed. Obviously has to go out there and earn it every single time. So just initial reactions from you, Austin, about the news. And obviously we can just kind of discuss fall camp as a whole too, but I wanted us to start off with that most important news first.
Yeah, I think that's what most people expected, anticipated ever since Payton Thorne decided to transfer to Auburn, right? And so I think that, the biggest surprise was kind of when it was coming and also who was pushing him the most. We talked a lot about what Coach Freeze's quotes might have meant after that last scrimmage. Was he talking about it narrowing down to 2, narrowing it down to 1? Kind of sounds like he was, after talking more and him elaborating further, he was ready to name Payton the starter last week. But Robbie had a better weekend, so he wanted to take it slow. And but enough happened this week, and enough that he saw that Payton was able to be named the starter quarterback, as you said, for just game 1 for sure. And we'll evaluate how it goes. But I think it's important when you look at what Coach Freeze has been saying. If Robbie handles this the right way, I think he's throwing that indicator on purpose, not as a saying he's not, but as a reminder to his quarterback that he'll still have a package. And you and I have been saying that for a while. Like, they're both incredibly athletic. We think we're both going to see both quarterbacks in game 1 and throughout the season that will help Auburn win. And I think that's the way it should be. So not overly surprised Payton was named the quarterback. I think it's a good time to go ahead and name him that starter so we can work through these next less than 2 weeks preparing for UMass and getting the game plan nailed down with him as starting quarterback.
And this is when most people thought the decision would come down, unless it continued to be such a difficult decision as Coach Hugh Freeze a week previous had indicated it had become. But this is obviously when you want to have this happen, as you address 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks technically, but 2 practice weeks essentially to prepare. When they get into that final, the actual week leading up, that's going to move into more of the traditional schedule of routines and how they're going to prepare and practice for a game. This last week, even though fall camp is over, it gives them that week to really hone in and prepare and get ready for the routine of the next week. So whether it was going to be Peyton, Robbie, or Holden, obviously the ideal world is you name that this week. I do agree with you that I think now we've seen how this concluded. It's obvious, 99% sure we can say that when he made those comments about, I had my mind made up, but then things changed, that means he probably had his mind made up about Peyton, but things got real interesting with Robbie and Holden. Let me park Peyton and Robbie because obviously they're the two biggest factors here in this, but I want to talk about Holden for a second. The smoke about Holden Geriner really making this difficult. I buy it because I've seen the kid a few times, play ball, and he's pretty incredible. How much of a factor do you think he ended up being in this final? Like, what was it? Just a lot of fan speculation, or do you really think he also made this a really difficult decision for Hugh Freeze?
That's a really good question. I think that it was probably, and just in my opinion, a little more fan speculation than was actually there. I think that Coach Freeze has complimented Holden since he got here on multiple occasions about his passing and his IQ. But I think when at the end, when it comes down to it, and I really don't even like to use this
Yep.
terminology because people take it different ways. But at the end of the day, Holden is not Hugh Freeze's guy. And I don't mean that, oh, well, he must not like him. No, that's not what I mean, because Robbie Ashford isn't technically Hugh Freeze's guy either.
Right.
They were just both here when he got here. But when you look at the quarterbacks that have come through Hugh Freeze's offense in the past, well, Peyton and Robbie are in a little bit different category than Holden's been.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just their skill sets are different. That doesn't mean Holden can never be a serviceable quarterback for Auburn, but I think it's going to take him, because his athleticism skills are different, a little more time to operate in that offense. And if you look at the quotes from this past week from Coach Freeze, him processing the RPOs and the different motions in the offense speak to that. It comes a little more easily, naturally for Peyton and Robbie because of their athleticism and their different skill sets. So I think a lot of it was probably more fan speculation, but I don't doubt, because we've seen what he's complimented Holden before on his passing, that he was able to make this interesting. He said not 2 to 3 weeks ago he wanted to narrow it down from 3 to 2. Well, that there's only 3 there. That tells me
Right.
Holden was in it at least for some time. So I think Holden definitely has grown and has matured since his time at Auburn, both on the field and off the field. But I'm not sure that he was really as close as some of us maybe thought he was.
Well, and reports from camp for practice on campus from media members were that they were very impressed with what they were seeing out of him in the limited time they were able to. And social media team for Auburn did a great job of stirring up some interest with a throw that he made that was just beautiful. So that's there too. I guess my concern now switches to, what does Holden feel like going forward? What's his future here? Obviously, classes just started. I think it's 15 days into classes they can make a decision to drop a class. So I guess that would mean to me there's about a 15 class period window where he could maybe make a transfer again. I'm probably butchering the timeline calendar on that, but my point is this: do you think that Holden will stay this year now that he knows that Robbie's number 2? Walker White's coming in next year. I mean, Walker White's got some time, still to get here, and he'll probably redshirt too. But just quick thoughts on that, because I want to get to obviously talk about Robbie and Peyton.
Yeah, as far as the 15 day, I think we're going to see Holden through this year.
Yeah.
I think he'll be on the sidelines for Auburn. I think, after the season, it might be a real question. We'll have to see. Because like you said, and I'm using that same verbiage again, I don't like it. He's not Coach Freeze's guy, but from here on out, the ones coming in, he's handpicking them. So
Yep.
I think it'll be interesting to see. I really like Holden, and I really like his skill set. I think he's impressive, and he's still really young. But if Auburn's planning on using Payton Thorne as a starting quarterback and using Robbie Ashford for however many package, I'm not saying that anybody's going to, but if they're both on the field, there's a likelihood-ish that they're going to get hurt. So Holden needs to be ready, and we better be hoping he doesn't transfer, because if that is to happen, you got to have somebody who knows the offense at least a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. I'm hoping that he'll see the value in staying for a year and continue to fight it out. But as we saw last year, two quarterbacks can go down very easily. Even if you're the third guy, you
Yes.
got to be ready. And based on what I've heard, the limited we've been able to see, I've said this entire quarterback race, I feel comfortable with all three of these guys, different skill sets. And I think Holden, to me, has a bright future, and I hope it's here with the Auburn Tigers. Let's talk about mainly Payton Thorne here. Obviously, we've already kind of opened up about Robbie and know we've known all along he was going to be a factor in this, regardless of how it shook out, because you don't leave a guy like that on the sideline. That's just stupid. And
Correct.
Coach Freeze even acknowledged that. But now that Payton is the starter, I guess my question then shifts to you. What does that say to you about this team? Did Payton starting over Robbie change your perspective of how this team might do? And I know that's maybe a hard question to answer, and maybe feels like if you answer it one way, you have less faith in one than the other. But I'm curious about this. I've been trying to talk to people about this. What does Payton being named the quarterback mean to you in terms of this football team's success?
It's a tricky question, like as you alluded to, and I think that it has more to do with why Peyton was chosen as a starter over Robbie. And again, I'm pulling straight from Coach Freeze's
Right.
mouth. Like I'm not here to speculate, but his words were that Peyton had more consistency passing.
Yep.
And so I think when you think about it through that lens, well, then that tells me what can this team be on the field in terms of wins and losses. Well, that might look to how the offense is going to look. And if Peyton's the more consistent passer, then I think that this team is, and you look at the receivers that were brought in through the transfer portal or recruiting, there's a focus on making sure that this passing attack is truly balanced with the running attack and that both can help each other. And I think if you have to have that to have a consistent passing game, you have to have a consistent passer. And so I think that is probably what he believes, obviously, since he named him the starter, gives Auburn the best chance to win, gives Auburn the best chance to be successful this year in terms of win-loss, is a consistent passing game. And so I'm hopeful that that's what comes of this. Like you just said, and like we've been saying, Robbie's going to be on the field. And, it's probably not going to be just to run. And the more that you make teams prep for that, the better, because that's less they're prepping for something else. So
Yeah.
I think choosing Peyton elevates that passing game. And I think overall that elevates Auburn's potential of success this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to look at this. Robbie, from what we know, has been developing as a passer even since the end of last season. But there were some clear signs that there was a ways to go in that. So you go to the guy who gives you that more consistent of a passing game that's where you really need to improve. We know everybody knows what Robbie can do with his legs. And you don't lose that factor even if he's the number two guy. Because when he comes in, they're going to be thinking run. But what happens? And he drops back and throws a beautiful bomb like he did in the Iron Bowl. Basically, the point is this: whether it was Peyton, whether it was Robbie, whether it was Holden, as I've said previously, all of these guys I felt comfortable with being the starting quarterback in a brand new year, in a brand new system. And I just hope they all get to have success. And right now, if you're Robbie and you're Holden, you're rooting for Peyton to have the best year ever and get out of here. To just get out of the way, sir, because we want our time next. That's what they should be rooting for. And obviously, if he does well, they'll get more opportunities to play as well and continue to hone their skills in real game time. So obviously, congratulations to Peyton, Robbie, Holden. We're obviously proud of you guys and looking forward to what you're going to accomplish this season. But the quarterback race has been decided, ending fall camp and a lot of that speculation. Austin and I, just go ahead and hide your head, Austin. I know. Just listen. I will take the blame for this one. We ended last week's show, episode 47. Will ever live in infamy of us forgetting to discuss. I mean, there's no other topic probably that should fall under our purview more than this one, Austin. And you brought it to my attention after we had got done recording, when we were still talking to some viewers. And that we had forgotten to do that. Obviously, Megan Schofield winning the U.S. Amateur had reminded us of, hey, we're rolling Toomer's Corner for the first time, like the New Oaks, for Megan Schofield. And we didn't talk about it. Like, how do we make that mistake, Austin?
Oh, I don't know. I remember when they sent out the news release and it was a big thing and everybody was so excited. It was like on Tuesday maybe of that
Mm-hmm.
week. And I just remember being like, "Oh, that is a great topic for Kyle and I to talk about this upcoming
It's
week."
like,
Like, we'll never forget that. And then, we were talking and you brought it up post show last week. They were sticking around. I did say when you and I were talking, prepping for our show, that I feel like we're missing something, and we both said, "Ah, we'll
it'll be
figure it
fine.
out."
It'll
And
be
then,
fine. We won't look like
nope.
complete idiots and just completely miss one of the biggest discussions of the week. But we are atoning for that this week. Auburn officially opened up again after a long last the
Mm,
Toomer's Oaks for rolling. Now, most people abided by that. Some still didn't. There was always a stray toilet paper in there. But for the
yep.
most part, people abided by the signage and things like that while these new trees were taking root. The second edition of these trees taking root. It has been a long process. Now, if you haven't, check out Clint Richardson and I did a little bit of a shorter segment about this, discussing the news of that when it initially happened, just kind of an initial reaction. But of course, we're going to talk about it here. Um, for the very first time in what's been almost a decade saga since the Toomer's Oaks were poisoned, removed, tried to be replanted, we will roll the oaks again this year. Already have been, and
Yeah.
but for football, what does that mean, Austin? I mean, fans that are listening to this that are not Auburn fans, they make fun of this tradition all the time, but what does that mean to you?
Oh gosh. What a loaded question, right? I think about a lot of things that happened growing up and learning about Auburn with my dad. Growing up and learning as when we come to Auburn and when we celebrate Auburn victories, this is what we do. And it's, you know, I'm going to get to it, but and it's these two trees, right? These are the Toomer's Oaks that we roll um, as part of our family tradition, right? Um, and I do like I like that throughout this last decade and a half almost, we've been able to kind of expand and for just logistics sake, spread out and roll other trees and really cover all of Sanford lawn, right? But not getting to roll the two specific oaks is something that's been lacking for a while, lacking the photo ops and lacking the special feelings of it all. And so it's exciting to get to be that's a reality that's come back. I was there, after my freshman years when they were replanted, the first edition. With my now wife, then girlfriend, and I both went out and watched that replaying on Valentine's Day of freshman year. Um, the I was there in school when some crazy person decided to light them on fire. We walked down to Toomer's Corner and looked at the aftermath. And it just felt like at some point, it felt like hope might not be restored and we might not get this back. Like there was talk of at some point, are we just going to put statues of these trees up? Or are we going to put bronze statues up and they'll just roll them? Thank the Lord we did not do that. Something as crazy and dumb as that idea.
Oh,
And
wow.
that
I was
these
actually in favor of that idea, to be honest with you.
no, no, Kyle,
I,
no, no, no. The the fact that we have not just random oak trees, but legitimately
yeah.
descendants of the original Toomer's Oaks now back at Toomer's Corner, able to be rolled after victories this year and celebrations of the Auburn family this year is awesome. And I'm glad that we are here to see this day. Finally, didn't feel like it would ever happen. Truthfully, I was very concerned that we wouldn't get to this point, but we are. And you
Yeah.
would think after all those memories and remembering all that, we would remember to talk about it a week ago, but we're here anyway. Doesn't matter.
If I may blame Megan Schofield because of the excitement of that. Maybe we were just like waiting, anticipating to see if she was going to win this. I don't.
Yeah,
Maybe I
yeah.
shouldn't blame her because she's the reason we're even remembering to talk about it. But I'm just saying, that we were very much anticipating that happening. I broke down this with Clint. He talked about the history. Clint's a great history buff for Auburn stuff. So I would highly
Mm-hmm.
recommend you go check that video out. It's also an audio podcast on that feed if you want to check it out. We chronicled more the history of this. We're talking about the feelings of it, the reaction of it. I wrote something in social media when they took the trees down about my kids would never get to stand amongst not even just the toilet paper, but the shade of those trees, and how much that meant that I, as my father's son, got to stand underneath that with him. And that really hurt me, because this was never about two trees. This was never
Correct.
about streams of toilet paper. I don't know why I threw up deuces. That's well,
Dude.
here I had such a heartfelt moment, and then I just threw up deuces with the toilet paper reference. That's the only stuff that you can get here on this show, folks. If I can try to bring it back to somewhat of a heartfelt moment here, that was what broke my heart about that whole thing. And it was never about the trees. It was never about the toilet paper. It was never even about the tradition. It was an attack on us as an Auburn family. And that is where, as we talk about here in the show, we experience the whole of the Auburn experience there, as David Housel says it. Graduations, engagements. You passed the test at school you never thought you were going to be able to pass. Right here, I did that to get your final grade for graduating. All of those things, and football games, obviously, happen there together. And the fact that we get to do that once again, we've always been able to do it to some degree. We found ways around it these last few years, but it's going to mean so much more. So UMass, let me just tell you something. When you see an extra amount of TP out there, it ain't about you. Let me just go ahead and say this, because we have to now because of Georgia State. We're not taking anybody for granted. We got to go out there and take care of business. But if we beat UMass like we're supposed to, it's not because of you, UMass. We just ready to roll these two things again. I don't think these trees are prepared with the love that they're about to get. It's going to be rough on them.
Oh, it's going to be nuts. And I liken it to, or I like to envision it at least as the last roll when, that 2013 A-Day game when they were just absolutely decked out. I think we're going to see something similar that first time Auburn football gets a win this year. And rightfully so. I'll echo what you said. The memories I have of the special times at that corner with those trees and with other friends and family. I'm glad that those trees and what they resemble will get to be a part of future memories again.
And it's some very eerie timing here, because if you remember, the last roll happened in the dawn of the Gus Malzahn era. And, we've been through all that, and obviously the very short stint of Bryant Harsin, and we're starting something new with these trees. And, sometimes it's hard to ignore some coincidences there. And this is not me saying that this is the hearkening of something brilliant that's going to be happening this football season, but it just feels pleasantly odd for this to all be taking place about this time. I'm sure there were some people in decision-making positions that were saying, you really think we can make this happen for this season? Listen, that marketing's a beautiful thing. You try to make it all work if you can. But the fact that it's happening this year, finally, again, is a beautiful thing. And I cannot wait. Which one are you going? Okay, so let me just ask this to close. You're standing facing Toomer's drugstore. That's left and right. They give you orientation there.
Facing Toomer's drugstore.
Which one is getting the love first, the right or the left?
So I'm looking at my right would be College.
Yes.
College tree. My
left would be
Mag Tree.
Yeah.
I'll probably be going left to Magnolia.
Why is there a reason? Just because it feels right?
Well, truthfully, it's probably going to be whichever I can get my way around to.
That's
first.
fair.
But I don't know. The left does feel. I think probably in my head, I just so vividly remember being there when it was charred from the fire.
Yeah,
I think that one needs a little extra love. So I'll be going Magnolia, I think.
Honestly, probably it's the same for me. Whichever I can get to first.
Yeah.
I will give both the trees a piece of TP regardless. I'm sure everybody will. And it's going to be a sad day for all the extra trees around that area. They're like, hey, man, y'all been loving on us for so long. What's going on? They're probably also like, we needed the break. Thank you. Thank you so much.
They'll get spread out. That's been a beautiful part of it is little families have gone down a little further and found a littler tree that the kids can just pick that toilet paper up over and over and over again. And so I think that has been a positive thing throughout the last few years is that we've spread the love. So we're going to make it a winter wonderland up there now.
winter wonderland and 100-degree temperatures to start off the year, but eventually we'll get down to what it actually feels like.
It'll actually look like
Yes.
a freeze warning, though.
It will actually look like a freeze warning. Finally, we can say that and kind of be less corny. The tradition returns in some sense, continues in another, and it's an exciting time for Auburn fans everywhere. The Toomer's Oaks are back open for business. That's been a great show talking about the quarterback race. Toomer's Oaks, apologies again from everybody, and obviously a little Auburn potpourri. If you want to check in with us on social media, you can find me on X and everywhere else pretty much. Kyle Loomis 24 is my Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter anymore. I keep messing that up. Handle. If you want to find E2C Network stuff, just look for E2C Network at the X handle, everything else. Where can they find you, Austin?
Austin G. Scott is where you can find me. I'm still up here, so I'll call it Twitter.
Just holding that line for as long as possible. Check in with him, myself, or E2C Network that way. Thank you guys for tuning into this episode. So we talk to you again. War Eagle.
War Eagle.